cool. Yeah.
That is such an unbelievable story. Should
Yeah,
be
it was
interviewing
pretty cool.
you.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, man. And like the coolest part is I'll always, no one can take that memory away. Like it's just so
No,
cool.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll talk hockey. We'll talk hockey a little bit.
Great.
And I wanted to even dig into the certified functional strength coach, just kind of like the cert and because you did
Yeah.
that for 5 years, right?
My wheelhouse. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't an owner or a founder, but I basically co-developed it with Kevin Carr.
Cool.
At the time of its inception, and we can go into this, but like I was still with Potenza. I was with the Sharks still.
Yeah.
So while Kevin was splitting his time with Boyle and developing the CFSC, I was basically splitting my time with Boyle and being with Sharks.
Cool.
And then ultimately, like, as soon as the Sharks season ended, it was like basically the launch of the CFSC. And then it was all hands on deck and we were moving forward. Yeah.
I love hearing that. That's so cool. I'd love to hear like what goes into that. I'm going to actually make that note.
Yeah.
And then
I got great Boyle stories and stuff too. Like
yes.
I got really good Boyle stories. So.
I'm gonna put that in. Boyle stories. Okay, cool. And then again, I'd love to dig into the Sharks thing. Like I'm just being a hockey guy. The Under Armour thing. Are you still with Under Armour?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Cool. And then just kind of like as we wrap, and again, I'm big on like, I just want to see where the conversation goes, but I don't want this to feel like I'm just hammering you with questions. I'm just going to get curious and we'll have the conversation. But if we get to it, I'd love to talk about the fact that so Megan said, you don't really love the email thing and your Instagram is just basically your kids and you're not shouting from the rooftops marketing. I'd just love to kind of have that conversation around that and how actually not marketing is probably working pretty well for you. And then just talking about Clubhouse Gym, and it looks like a really cool space. I'm sure. Look, we were supposed to get down to Boston last April, right when COVID hit. We got one of my best friends. His wife went to BU, played hockey there. So they were going to show us around, and of course couldn't go. So I can't wait to get back down there and just like do a little tour of all the gyms.
Hey, who is it, if you don't mind me asking?
Who's my friend? Her name's Britt Hergesheimer. She's definitely been to Boyle. I think she only played for 2 years and then she had ankle surgery and that was it. And this would have been this would have been right around the time you were starting, maybe like 2010, 2011. So it's quite a while ago. But yeah, she played for a couple of years and she's nothing but awesome things to say about Boston and the university and all that stuff.
Yeah. One of my top athletes, sort of silly thing to say. One of my closest friends who I also train is Kaylee Fratkin. She played at BU and she's on the Boston Pride. She actually was just voted yesterday Defensive Player of the Year for the NWHL.
I saw that on your social media. I have a feeling the name Fratkin definitely resonates. I think Britt has talked about her.
I think she's from Vancouver. Her brothers played. She was actually the first woman ever to play in junior in Vancouver, in men's junior.
Oh, that's so cool. So I actually I got to play against Shannon Zabados in junior. The goalie. But it's a lot different when you're playing as a player and getting hit. That's for sure. And getting slashed and everything. That's super cool. All right. Well, if you're cool, and do you have any questions for me before we dive in?
No, I mean, I've done these a lot, so
sweet. So let's just jump in, man. So I do
have a couple dogs laying at my feet. If we get a bark here and there, if someone delivers a package or something, but just that.
That's the best part about these things. I'm going to do that. I'm going to add in the bio after. I just pulled it off your website. Then, so we'll just jump right in and and get
Love
after
it.
it.
Cool.
All right. So we're here with Marco Sanchez, fresh from Boston, and super excited to chat with him. So, first thing I want to dive into, Marco, we connected a little earlier here on, we're both hockey guys. And you said growing up, hockey was before everything else. So, while I welcome you to the show, I'd love to just ask you about, what got you started in hockey, first of all, and how did it become a love for you?
Yeah, sure. That's awesome. So I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, which, people may have heard of, like the Battle of Lexington and Concord, the Revolutionary War, the shot heard around the world. That's kind of where it all started. So I grew up there, and I was third generation hockey player in Lexington. My grandfather played, my uncle played, and my uncle actually played with Steve Leach, who ended up having an NHL career. He played for the Bruins, and I think he played for the Blues also. They played together in high school growing up. So it was kind of just destined that I would play hockey like from the moment I was born. I don't know. I throw and write with my right hand, but my uncle is a lefty. And I think the first stick I ever picked up in his garage was a left-handed curve. So somehow I developed, being a lefty. I swing a golf club lefty, a baseball bat lefty, but
Nice.
everything else I do with my right hand, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I was thrown on skates at an early age. My dad has videos of me pushing the milk crate around the arena. And,
Yes.
my mom worked part-time at the rink. So I was always skating with the figure skating coaches. And, I was on the ice a lot as a kid. I was just very fortunate that with my mom working there that I was able to get a lot of ice time. And by no means did that make me like any good. Like I was, just an average kid who loved to play hockey. But yeah, like you said, it took precedent over everything. If there was ever a conflict, and it was kind of like, we knew it in my house too. Like my mom would always say, if something came up, we can't this weekend because we're going to Ottawa for a tournament, or we'll be in Lake Placid, or we'll be
Yeah.
here or there. And, as a kid, I think being a little older now, you realize how many sacrifices your parents made in order for you to play at such high volume, and the tens of thousands of dollars a year that went into tournaments and travel, and never taking a family vacation that wasn't surrounded by a tournament. It was
Yeah.
always like, oh, we're going to go on vacation here because you have a tournament, so we'll spend a few days before and after. But yeah, I mean, I love the game so much. I think it's the greatest game that exists. Um, and I'll probably feel that way until the day I die. I'll do everything I can to get my daughters on skates as soon as they're old enough. I hope so badly that they want to continue. So yeah, it was a big part of my life, and it remains a big part of my life still.
That's super cool. Yeah. I think, yeah, not only financially what your parents do, but like, yeah, the time coming. I remember my parents were always in the stands. I was lucky that my parents could be, but they were always in the stands and they were always
Yeah.
watching, and it's so powerful. So it sounds like then your role on the team, were you like the grinder? Were you like the third liner, or what did you do?
No, I was actually, when I was younger, I was kind of like a first line center guy. Like
Nice.
I always, growing up, I love to model my game a little bit off of a Pavel Bure. Like I loved like I was a smaller guy, but I had some speed, and I like to be a playmaker. For a long time, I struggled with wanting to be a goal scorer. And, as I got older and I had better coaching, I realized that I was a lot better, like a two-way player. And so now, if I were to still play, the player that I would say that I admire the most and would strive to be like would be like a Patrice Bergeron. Like a guy who
Yes.
doesn't always, he's not always crushing it on the stat sheet, but he does so many of the little things that don't end up on the stat sheet.
Mhm.
Killing penalties, first man back, and just making smart plays, clear the zone. That is the kind of player I evolved into as I got a little bit older. But my career ended at the high school level. I didn't play college hockey. Um, you know, I I wasn't good enough. I wasn't committed enough. Maybe if I had been more focused, maybe if I had found Mike Boyle earlier in my life, and there's a lot of what ifs, right? But I have no regrets. It formed some of the strongest friendships I could ever imagine having, and outside of COVID times, I actually still go back to my hometown every Thursday night and skate with guys that I grew up learning how to skate with, that I've been friends with for 25 plus years. And we skate on Thursday nights, and then we hammer Bud Lights in the parking lot after.
I was
The
gonna
way
say.
the way any good fat, slow retired guy would be.
I was gonna say, yeah. I'm assuming there's no beers consumed on those Thursday nights. Yeah, Fridays maybe a
Right.
little rough some mornings.
Very rough.
Before we get into like some serious stuff about hockey, tell me, and this is gonna throw you maybe for a curve, maybe not. What ultimate? You're standing in the tunnel. You're ready to come out for like the high school championship game. Ultimate
Okay.
skate out song. What's the song that you're skating out to?
Oh my gosh. Like, do I have to place myself back in high school?
Place
Something from that?
yourself there. What's the one
Oh,
that just gets you
geez.
buzzing around the rink, fired up?
Jeez. Honestly, I think because the Bruins have been doing it as their third period song for so long, and we definitely used it in warmups a lot, was Thunderstruck AC/DC. That's just a bit like, it's different when you're at the Garden and have a multi-million-dollar sound system, right? Versus like it was probably coming out of a boombox and Hayden
Yeah.
Ice Rink in Lexington, Massachusetts. Thunderstruck can really get you turning. I love it.
Even on the crackled speakers of the old barns,
Yeah,
it's still
right.
good. Thunderstruck is still, it's like the bass is like it seems like it's gonna break the speaker, but you don't care. You're like, this is sick.
Right.
I'm buzzing
You're
around.
just worried like the speaker's like rattling on the wall, and you're like, that thing's coming down if anybody
Yeah.
turns it up any further.
Don't turn it up. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Oh, that's so, yeah. I get the goosebumps just thinking about those. That's the best moment, I think, is skating out to that
Right.
awesome song.
Right.
Talk to me, you talked about forming those friendships and really, really the bonds that you formed. What would you say was some, maybe one or two huge lessons that you took out of hockey or just out of, playing sports growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one, and I kind of try to treat all my relationships like this, right? And I think having played, and I think football has a very similar mentality to hockey, and I'm not sure if it's expressed as much in other games, but when you have any sort of relationship, whether it's a teammate or a friendship or a business partner or a spouse or whatever it may be, the the uh, the commitment and like the loyalty and the willingness to sacrifice for the person to your left and the person to your right, I think is probably the biggest thing, right? And that's how I try to manage all my relationships, especially like my marriage and being a father. Like I always tell my wife like that I'm constantly in relentless pursuit of creating the best life I can for us, right? And
Oh,
I think that involves so many different. I think that involves focusing on so many different areas, um, not just being like professionally or financially driven, but also prioritizing your self-care and like prioritizing family time and like having all those things balanced. But I think that ultimately is it. Like those relationships are based on, I think, the willingness to sacrifice, and maybe not even necessarily sacrificing, but just knowing that person would make a
yeah.
sacrifice for you if they needed to, right? Or if they got called upon to do so. And I think that is really something that has shaped who I am as, like I said, as a father, as a husband, as a business person, as a friend.
Mhm.
And so I try to carry that with me all the time in all my relationships.
I love that. I love that. And I think, yeah, like that, people often say when, I always get the question if the hometown Jets aren't playing well and people are like, oh, what's going on with them? They're doing everything it's like, there's these unspoken things in sports in general that I think totally carry over to life that are
Mhm.
so important that some people don't even notice them, but like that knowingness that the person on your left, the person on your right, or, your partner in life or whatever it is going to, they got your back no matter what. Like there's
Right.
something there. And on the flip side, if you can't fully trust that teammate on your left or on your right has your back, I mean, how can you go into battle? Like,
Right.
how can you do that? How can you sacrifice 100% yourself if you can't trust that they're going to do the same?
Right.
And that's really cool. And I mean, it's really cool for you to know that and to be like, hey, I'm going to show up this way. Are you on board?
Right.
You ready to this,
Right.
whether it's a client or whether it's a team member at your gym or whatever, or your wife is like, I'm going to do it. So
Right.
like, are you? That's
And
awesome.
I always say like the ultimate form of like commitment or dedication to somebody is defending them even when you think they're wrong, right? That's something I
Mm.
said to my wife in our wedding vows. I was like, I will defend you even when I think that you're wrong. And like, if you think about it, like in the hockey sense, right? Like, let's say Marchand takes somebody in the corner and slew foots him, right? And then somebody else goes after him. You know that Charlie Coyle's coming in to back him up, even though Marchand did a shitty thing. Sorry if
Code. No,
I
you
hope
go for it.
okay to curse, right?
Yeah.
So it's that also. It's that unshakable, unbreakable, commitment to the person, whoever it is, that's your teammate or your partner.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it really is the code. It's the kind of unspoken sometimes code. Um, to take a turn into the training world, I always find that the former athlete to trainer is a very quick jump, because you got the locker room feel in the gym, and obviously your life has been fitness and movement. How did you make the shift into training? Was it something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did you kind of fall into it? How did that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was entirely accidental, to be completely honest. So, like one of the things I mentioned, right? Like I wasn't super committed to like being a college hockey player, which is probably why it didn't work out for me. But my time in being involved in fitness in high school, I guess I never really connected the dots as to like, oh, me being in the gym is going to help my game. It was more of like, me being in the gym is going to make me bigger and stronger, but like I never really connected the dots. Like those two wires never really got crossed. And so after my hockey career was over and I went to college, I was actually studying economics and business management because my grandfather, who had been a hockey player as well, he owns a pretty large, successful international consulting firm, and my mom works for him, and I always thought that was going to be like the road that I would travel on also, um, because it just sort of seemed like a natural progression for me. And there was one semester where I was naturally procrastinating, like I always do, in selecting my electives, and so I had the majority of my classes picked out, and I needed to get an elective, so I like walk into my I walk into my counselor, or I can't remember the name of the individual now. I walk into her office and she hands me a piece of paper, basically two pieces of paper stapled together that probably 2 weeks ago was a big packet. And she said, "This is the list of the available electives left for you that fit your schedule." So I was like, "Oh, there's nothing here." And I flipped to the second page and there's a course and it says Strength and Conditioning 101 with Dr. Tim Morgan. And I was like, I kind of looked at her and I was like, strength and conditioning. I was like, that's a class. And she was like, yeah, it's actually an entire major. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, you could be a health science student with a concentration in strength and conditioning. And so I was like, okay, I think I'm going to be in this office for a while. So like we closed the door and it was at that moment I switched everything. I went from a business and economics major to a health science and strength and conditioning major. That was a interesting conversation with my folks, but
I
like I
bet.
kind of just did it, like no conversation with them or anything. I just did it. And then that history was, the rest was history. In fact, it was that one class, Professor Tim Morgan, who spoke to us about internship opportunities, and he said, there's a local strength and conditioning, you know, facility, and the guy who owns it is world renowned, and they have a summer internship program. I encourage anybody who's interested to apply for it. And it was that day after that course, I applied for the internship online. I emailed my professor to tell him that I had applied for it. He happened to know Nicole Rodriguez, who was the internship coordinator at the time. And he followed up with an email from me, and he said, hey, thanks for letting me know. I'll shoot Nicole an email for you right now. And this probably segues into like the next topic of our conversation, which is ultimately I was called a few weeks later to go into Mike Boyle's for an in-person interview for the internship. And I remember like I got all dressed up, and I had on like a nice sweater and a button down underneath it. And I walked in, and I was sitting there waiting for Steve Bunker, who was also part of the internship coordination team at the time. And Mike Boyle walked in and introduced himself to me. And I'm sure he knew what I was there for, but he kind of just shook my hand, said, hi, I'm Mike Boyle, and kept going. And then, you know, the rest is history. I was offered a position at the internship, and that's when I started that summer of 2009.
That's so awesome. So yeah, one little blip. It's you know, I'm becoming more and more aware of the fact that, like, you know, these things that seem so crazy and out there are all just kind of leading us. You know, you were on a crash course for that for a long time, from the procrastination to the only option left, to taking that course, to changing your major, to getting the opportunity at the internship, to actually acting on it, which a lot of people don't do because they go, it's world renowned. How am I going to get, you know, I'm not going to get that internship. Right.
Right.
To showing up and getting it. I mean, I love just to follow the breadcrumb stories. So you get started with Boyle. You mentioned you have some Boyle stories, which I definitely want to hear.
Oh, yeah.
But what would you say, like, Mike Boyle he's really, for our generation, you know, I started in 2011, you started 2009. He was a godfather of the training world. What, in terms of, I mean, you know, let's leave it open-ended. What are some of the lessons that you took from him, either specific or just like the way that he carried himself and did his business?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's something that I could talk about for hours. I won't.
Love it.
We can have the abridged version, but it's also been nice because over the years, I've been asked this question so many times, so I've been able to fine tune the answer, as well as now having been out of Mike Boyle strength and conditioning for a little over 2 years. I have different perspectives. You know, like you realize even more of the things that you learned now that you're removed from the situation you were in, because when you're in there, it's kind of like a bubble of this unbelievable, palpable energy that, you know, we kind of talked about, that you get from a camaraderie of a team, where it's just like, I know this guy's got my back. I know this girl's got my back also. So there are so many lessons that I learned in there. And I tell Mike every time I have an opportunity to talk with Mike, and it's typically, you know, I'm connecting with him around the holiday or his birthday. And like, I will be thanking Mike Boyle until the day he dies. Because not just of the opportunity to work there for 10 years and all the lessons and takeaways, but the strongest relationships I have in my life were formed inside the four walls of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. Like, at my closest friends, my clients, didn't meet my wife at Boyle's, but I was working there when we met. So like, you know, that whole feeling of community and everything that exists there is real. In terms of like actual takeaways from Mike, you know, a few things that I remember so vividly were like, you know, nobody is above any job. So Mike used to have this thing that he would say, like, never step over a piece of trash, right? Like if there was a piece of trash on the ground in the gym somewhere, like, it wasn't an intern's responsibility to pick it up. It wasn't the cleaning lady's responsibility to pick it up when she came late at night. Like, it was the responsibility of the person who identified it first. And one of the things that was so great about Mike is that not only did he did he have these like ideas and theories that we would live by inside the gym, but he was actually the biggest practicer of the, if that's even a word, of the things that he would preach. So my situation for a long time was very unique because I took a 5:20 a.m. adult group on Tuesday and Thursday mornings for about 6 years, 6 or 7 years. And the only other coach in the gym with me at that time was Mike,
Of
because
course.
he would train a couple of his buddies. And Mike was like me, like Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, he would come in a little later, but Tuesday and Thursdays were his early mornings. And so Mike and I would both arrive right around 5 a.m. And it was kind of this, at least, at least in my head, this like unspoken competition about like who was going to get there first. And sometimes, I drank my coffee at the gym. I had an espresso machine there, but Mike is a big Dunkin' Donuts guy. So sometimes I would get off the highway and I'd see Mike's truck in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot, and I'd be like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm going to beat him this morning. So we had this like little, like, at least in my head, right? It was always like, I got to beat Mike. So I got a lot of alone one-on-one time with him, like during these mornings that, 52 weeks a year for, 6 or 7 years. It was a lot of one-on-one time with Mike that was so valuable. And I'll never forget one thing Mike used to complain about. This is a good story, and goes back to the whole extreme ownership, sweep the sheds type ideas, that Mike would get so frustrated when people would say the dumpster's full, we need to call and have it emptied, because he would go out there all the time and he would see cardboard boxes that had been emptied but not broken down flat, and someone would just throw them in the dumpster. So they'd take up a ton of space, but the dumpster wasn't really full. So I never forget, like, pulling in the parking lot, the back parking lot, like 5:15 in the morning, and Mike is literally in the dumpster stomping on boxes, right? And so I'm like, this guy owns the gym, makes a ton of money, is world renowned, is everything I want to be someday in my fitness career. And here he is outside in the dark, in the winter at 5 a.m. in the dumpster, stomping on boxes, where he has an entire staff of people who can and should do this for him. And so that's like one little memory that has always stuck with me. Seeing Mike in the dumpster that morning was kind of just like, oh, Jesus. And now as a gym owner, it really sets the precedent for me and the expectations that I carry for myself in terms of how I conduct my business.
It's such a microcosm of the practice what you preach idea of just
Right.
like, yeah, like it sounds like everything that he always said, hey, I want you guys to do this, he was always willing to do it. And I honestly think like that generation, that's the best thing that generation can teach our generation is to like, no matter how skilled you are or how knowledgeable you are or how quote unquote important you feel, there's always those little things that can be done that need to be done. And,
Right.
and like that, like the fact that he's willing to get in that dumpster and crush those boxes is exactly why he has the name that he has and the business that he has and the amazing experience that you got. That's
Right.
why.
Right.
I'd love to, just because there's so much that I want to get to. And I think you just summed it up so well. You get, you're in the middle of working with Mike Boyle, working at this place, and you get an opportunity that I'd love to learn more how this came about, to work with the San Jose Sharks. It sounds like their AHL team in Worcester, right?
Right.
How does that opportunity come about?
Sure. Well, interestingly enough, what a lot of people don't know is that I had applied for that position in 2011, when Jamie Rodriguez left, on Mike's recommendation, and I did not get the job the first time around. They went with Ken Hetzel, who I think ended up going and being involved in Winnipeg at some point, or maybe Vancouver.
Okay.
So, irrelevant. So fast forward 2013, and Ken gets an opportunity to make a jump to either a different American League team or to the NHL. And, this kind of presents itself to me again. And it wasn't through Mike this time, although I'm sure it would have been, but somebody kind of beat him to it. So it was interesting. There's a good friend of mine, Kevin Shafer. He played hockey at BU. And then he ended up playing and bouncing around the American League and the coast for a little while. and I just knew him from Boyles, and he called me and said, "Hey, I know that the Sharks are looking for somebody to run the American League program. Do you know anybody who might be interested?" And I said, "Well, shit, like I'm kind of interested because it's right here. Like I don't have to relocate. I can, navigate this with Mike. I'm sure Mike will encourage me to take this opportunity and help me and support me." So long story short, I end up going through an application process with two other guys who work at Boyles at the time. So me and two other guys at MBSC are all three applying for the same position with the Sharks. And I'm sure they have other outside candidates as well. And it was pretty standard application process. I had a couple phone interviews with Mike Potenza. I had a phone interview with the assistant GM. And then Mike Potenza wanted me to send him over some programming and some thoughts around it. And I'm sure he spoke to Mike in the process. And ultimately, I ended up being offered the position, and it was quick. It was like July or August. I was in San Jose for mini camp, like 2.5, 3 weeks later. I was in San Jose, and I'll never forget, like going into my hotel room, and there's like a Sharks Reebok duffel bag with my name, stitched on the side of it. And there's sneakers and jackets and hats and shorts and everything you can imagine, right? So much stuff that I had to mail a lot of it back to Boston. Like I couldn't even bring it on the plane. And yeah, like it was so amazing for me because of my love for hockey and how much I cherish the game, to find out in a matter of 2 weeks that I was going to be getting on an airplane and going to help Mike Potenza work on guys with like Patrick Marleau and Sean Thornton and it was Joe Pavelski. It was just so exciting for me. It was actually very hard in the beginning to contain my excitement and be a professional and not act very starstruck but yeah, it was such a blessing, and I was super, super excited and super happy that I had the opportunity.
And what a just without even saying it, what a lesson in sticking with it and just being like, when you get presented an opportunity again, not being too far above it, to be like, yeah, I'm interested in it. I want to, I want to do this thing. And then to get that opportunity, I early in my career got the opportunity to work with NHL players. And there was a few in there that you're like, oh, I've only seen you on TV, and you get a little starstruck, but then you realize pretty quickly. I remember pretty quickly, for me, it was Travis Hamonic asked me something, and they were coming to me to ask me questions. I'm like, oh, like, okay, like they expect me to do a job. Again, it's that same thing we went back to, is like, they're like, well, I'm going to show up and work my ass off, so I'm expecting you to as well. So, help me. Like, here's what I need. Here's my question. And you're just like, okay, we're getting into it. It's time for me to like put my professional face on, get rid of the starstruck thing, and let's do this thing, because I think I can help you. Which is super cool. One of the cool things too that I find about the AHL, we have now an AHL team and the NHL team here in Winnipeg. We had the Manitoba Moose for a long time before the Jets were back, but I love the AHL brand that they're so hungry. Mm-hmm. These guys are so hungry because they're so freaking close to getting there. I'd love to know, was there any stories that you had of just that, like that straight up hunger of just like these guys that are at the AHL level that either want to get to the NHL or want to get back to the NHL, just from the gym or maybe even from games or anything like that?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because I have a lot of like up and down stories of, like you mentioned, right? But I will say from my season with the Sharks, a couple of the real highlights were, that Michael Haley was in the American League that year with us, and he was getting called up a bunch too. But it was exciting for not just me, but for the guys in the room, like a lot of the younger guys who were just out of school or maybe even just come over from Europe, to be with a veteran guy who not only was a veteran guy and did everything the right way, but also was just tough as nails and was not afraid to go toe to toe with anybody every night. So, and the enforcer role in hockey is one that has a strange reputation. I think that people who know and understand the game understand what an enforcer is, and people who don't know the game don't understand what an enforcer is. But I've always said it's actually my favorite type of player to work with, because the dynamics of managing them, or managing their training is really, really fun for me, because there's so many nuances, not just physically but mentally as well. And I think that, people just, often look at the enforcer and be like, oh, this guy's a jerk off, he's a goon, he's just a bully or whatever. And they have no idea, like, he is what we talked about. Like, he is the ultimate teammate. He is willing to sacrifice more than anybody else himself for the people around him, right? So he should be praised more than anybody else is. And from the outsider's perspective, they don't see that, right? But from the insider's perspective, when you're part of that team or you're part of that organization, you worship that person. So for me, like, Michael Haley was somebody that I really enjoyed working with and training, and he was always, he loved his bio steel. And so because he was always good to me, he would always take care of me around the holidays and stuff. So I always would, between every period, he'd come off the ice, got 2 fresh bio steals right in his stall waiting for him, because I knew he was going to slug them both back. So he was one. And then one thing I also learned when I was there, which, one about hockey politics, where there's guys who I'm like, why is this guy playing? Why isn't this guy in the NHL? Why isn't this guy in the coast? There's obviously a lot of politics involved, but you get to recognize that, you mentioned how hungry these guys are to get to the next level. Some guys, when they get there, is when they actually elevate, and then you never see them again. So for me, it was Melker Karlsson, who's now a consistent 4th line guy in San Jose and has been for a long time. Random guys would get called up here and there, and Melker got called up, and then I never saw him again.
Yep.
Right. And he went up to San Jose, and I think he scored in the first game, and I think he had a couple assists and another goal in like the first 3 or 4 games. He had a couple points, and I never saw him again. And if you had asked me a week ago, be like, hey, look at the whole team here and pick somebody to go up to the NHL, it wouldn't have been him. But he's one of these guys who got there and is like, okay, now I'm faced with another level of adversity, and now I'm going to elevate my game and myself to meet this up here. And because I don't want to go back to the American League. I don't think anybody does, right? And I think that was just so cool. Like, obviously, I wish I could have seen him again, but I never saw him again. That was it. It was like, see you later. Never seen him, never heard from him again. The only guy I really stay in touch with every now and then, I'll shoot him a text, and I texted him when he was in Vegas and they went to the Cup, was Ryan Carpenter, who's been pretty consistent with the Blackhawks now for a while. But he was just one of the nicest, hardest working guys you ever met. And I really hope he has a lot of success, continues to have a lot of success. He's doing great.
Yeah. Speaking of the never see him again, a buddy of mine, I played with him growing up, Darren Helm. He was in the AHL with Grand Rapids. He was, grinding it out. He got the call up, never returned. He's been in the NHL ever since, and he won a cup and all that amazing stuff. And those are the guys, like, that's the guy you want to be, right? And I say this to the strength coaches that I work with all the time, is like, new levels, new devils, but you just have to be able to rise above those, because like, so many coaches think that they're going to get to 6 figures and they're just done, or they're going to get to a certain thing and they're done. It's like, no, like, you actually have to now stay there. Like, now you got to do the work, because there's a whole bunch of people. If you're talking the NHL, AHL, when you're in the NHL, there's a whole bunch of people chasing for your spot. And if you let go, that spot's gone forever for a lot of guys, for the majority of guys. Right. And so it's really cool to hear those stories about the guys who do take advantage, even though maybe they weren't the guy you would think, but they take advantage of it. And then the team can't send them down. There's just no other option. Now, around that time, and I do want to get to this because I find it really interesting, around that time, you and Kevin Carr are kind of co-developing a new certification, which ended up becoming the Certified Functional Strength Coach, CFSC, which is, in my opinion, is well known now.
Totally.
What goes into developing a certification or a program like that?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll be completely honest. Like Kevin Carr, Brendan Rierick, and Kevin Larrabee really did all the heavy lifting while I was with the Sharks. Um, I was pretty fortunate that they did all that, and then my run with the Sharks ended, and Worcester moved the team out to California. I did not go, and I was able to kind of step into something that was already developed, but we then spent the next several years really fine tuning it and making changes and adapting it and realizing what what went into creating a successful certification company. And I think one of the biggest things surrounding that was Mike was pretty resistant for a while. A lot of people had been asking Mike to make a certification. We had the mentorship program, but people really wanted a Mike Boyle certification. And Mike, if you follow him or he's not much of a certification guy. Like he's like, I don't really care about letters. Like I don't care too much about it. The last thing we need is another certification. So I think Kevin approached him and sort of presented it in a way that said, well, what if we make an education company that just happens to have a certification attached to it? And I think Mike really liked that because, as everybody knows, Mike is a huge proponent for continuing education. So when they sort of shifted the mindset to we're going to make an education company, there's a certification attached to it, but really what we want to do is raise the industry standard of coaches and trainers and bring them up to a level that we find to be acceptable, because I think we all can agree that the fitness industry has a very low barrier for entry. It's very easy to get laid off from your job as the accountant or salesperson on Friday and attend a weekend course. And then all of a sudden you're a trainer and you can start training people on Monday. We can't really do anything about the fact that that barrier exists, that lack of a barrier exists, but we can do something about bringing up at least what we believe is the standard and educating as many people as possible. So the certified functional strength coach is basically the Mike Boyle strength and conditioning system packaged into a one-day course where attendees would be taken through not just the how, but the actual why. So for our coaches who were getting involved in it from the coaching side and running courses, it was pretty easy because I would just say, like, listen, all you have to do is run this the same way you run a group, but you have to give more oral whys, right? We have to explain why we stretch this way. We have to explain why we mobilize this way. We have to explain why we have a system of progressions and regressions and where to use them appropriately. And so it was a pretty easy transition for coaches who had had a few years of being in the facility under their belt to move right into the teaching world. And honestly, for me, it is under the umbrella of my time spent at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. But for me, I think the Certified Functional Strength Coach has been the most impactful thing that I've done in my career, because I've got to educate, a couple thousand coaches, and I got to travel all over the world and form friendships and relationships with people that I never would have met. And I don't think we ever imagined that it was going to do that, right? We ran the first ever CFSC in September of 2015, I believe, in Woburn. We had like 65 trainers attend. And then it was like you just blinked, and there we were in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Germany, in Florence, in Australia, in Japan. And like we never ever could have or would have imagined that it would have done what it did. And so as a coach, as a trainer in this industry, it really helped shape my identity. It helped shape me as an educator and as a coach. And it really, it was really helpful for me to get myself involved in other, education and teaching avenues. From there, I was asked to become a speaker on the Perform Better Summits. And I've been asked to, go to other presentations. And again, the CFSC was me getting to practice teaching every other weekend for 5 years till I was like, this is easy for me now. Like it's a script. So yeah, I mean, it was and remains the most impactful thing I've done in my career, for sure.
I mean, talk about like, I mean, I just want to say that I love what that stands for. I think that's a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because the standard I mean, this industry, you and I can both agree, is so incredible. I mean, there's so much we can do with in the fitness industry, but it's somewhere along the way, it seems to have lost its way.
Yeah.
And you know, like you say, the low barrier of entry, and then the fact that, you know, you can have people who aren't necessarily as good at coaches, but who are working with more people, and those great coaches are struggling to figure out how to work with more people and how to be as efficient as they possibly can in their
Mm-hmm.
business. So it sounds like, you know, we're rolling down the same road here, and I love that idea. Um, you know, to skip ahead a little bit, because I know we're running short on time, I really do want to talk about, so you made the move. I want to say, was it in 2019 to open your own space?
So in 2019, I always had a plan of opening my own space. I just wasn't in the right position at the time. And I saw an opportunity to shift gears for a little while and try something different. And let me be perfectly clear that what I left Mike Boyle strength and conditioning with the the most pleasant departure that I could have ever imagined. You know, I did it the right way. I gave Mike and his managing partner Bob, I want to say 2.5, 3 months notice. You know, like my relationship with them still remains extremely, extremely strong and a huge value and part of who I am. But I felt like I was reaching a place where I had maximized my learning and earning potential at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. And that's not a knock on them, but they have a business model that is very, very good and designed at taking young coaches and evolving them and helping them get to the next thing. Now, Kevin Carr and myself, you know, before I left, we were the two most the tenured employees that they had ever had. And to their credit, Mike and Bob were also simultaneously figuring out how do we manage employees who don't want to leave now, right? Because we've always been in a situation where people would come here, they'd work really, really hard, they'd do a really good job, and then we would prepare them for the college level, or we'd prepare them to go to the NHL, we'd prepare them to open their own facility or become independent contractors. And so for them, there was a bit of learning as well. And I think they're still doing that because obviously Kevin Carr is still there. And some of my friends who, you know, we definitely changed the system there because I have friends who have been there now for moving on 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And that just wasn't the case before. When Kevin and I were young guys, people would leave after 3 or 4 years. It was just a stepping stone to your next move. So I saw a brief opportunity to change gears, and I actually took a job managing a personal training department at Equinox Sports Club in downtown Boston, which is the biggest club in the Northeast region before New York City. And it was all new to me. Normally, it's a position that they promote from within. I was the first outside hire that they had in that position company-wide. And I was just immediately thrown into managing a team of 55 trainers, all of whom I'd never met, all of whom were probably like, who the heck is this guy? Like, why do we have a new guy here who's going to try to tell us how to do our jobs? And to be honest, like, it obviously wasn't for me. It provided me with some stability that was really important at that time in my life. Salary, benefits. I was able to buy my house. My wife and I were pregnant at the time. So at the moment, it was the right move for me. Long term, it obviously wasn't. But I did actually pick up a lot of things from when I was there that now apply to what I do as a business owner. So it was an interesting move to see, you know, Mike Boyles is just very tactical, technical X's and O's of coaching and training. Like, come here and become an unbelievable coach and trainer. And then to go to see like a multi-million-dollar corporation and how they manage a team of personal trainers and how they run a whole personal training and coaching department. I was like, okay, let me take away from here what I can and apply some of those strategies to how I coach and train people. And I think I can make a stellar business. So I did that for about 10 months. Then I quit my job when my daughter was born, and I was off for a couple months, and then COVID happened. So I did very little for about a year. And then in August of 2020, so last year, is when I opened Clubhouse.
Right in the middle of a pandemic. I love that.
Right in the fucking middle of it. Like right in dead center. Bullseye.
Bullseye. Let's just open a gym. Huge expenses. Let's just do it.
Let's do it.
So just this is the last thing that I just want to learn from you is, so you've worked for one of the best in the world for a long time. You've created an industry, hopefully industry changing certification. You've worked for professional sports teams. You've now worked for a multi-billion dollar company in Equinox, and now you've started your own space. Where do you think the coaching world is headed in 2021 and beyond? Like the coaching world, the fitness world, a lot of people are saying online, but I don't know if that's the end all be all. What do you think a coach is going to have to do to succeed now?
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point. Like a lot of people will harp on the fact that like training is going online, like it's a virtual world now. And those are typically the people who only work in a virtual space and have never actually stepped foot in a gym and coached people. Right. So they're kind of just, they're kind of trying to convince themselves, hopelessly wishing that remains the case as well. But I will say that in-person training is going nowhere. In-person training is going to come back, and it is going to come back with a vengeance, because I think that we are in a society now where COVID has given a lot of people a wake-up call to the fact that, hey, something may happen in this world at a given time. And if you are somebody who suffers from some sort of comorbidity that is within your control, that is a lifestyle comorbidity, that that may be consequential for you, right? We can go far down a political COVID rabbit hole here, and I'm not going to do that. But I will say that the CDC recently released some information in the United States that 82% of the COVID patients who were hospitalized on ventilators and or died suffered from obesity. Right. And so I'm not saying like, oh, if you're not obese, COVID's not a thing. Right. Obviously, there are outliers and things have happened to perfectly healthy people have been very negatively impacted by this as well. But I think now the future of coaching involves way more than just an hour of being in the weight room. I think that you are going to have to become like an executive lifestyle manager now. And that I think has a couple different scales, right? You could be somebody like me, and you could manage that for a handful of uber wealthy people at a very, very high level and a very, very high cost. Or you could be someone who handles that at a micro level for a lot of people at a more economical cost, right? And I think that involves, like you said, both in-person coaching, virtual coaching, as well as the lifestyle stuff. I think is going to become way more. I think that we're going to see a culture shift because people have probably realized, well, not probably, but people have realized the value of being home, of having more balance, of having more family time. Like there's going to be a ton of resistance to people going back to their offices. And to be honest, a lot of smart business owners have recognized that their employees are better when they work from home. If you don't have to bookend the day with 45 minutes to an hour in the car, and you get to dedicate that time to your self-care, to exercise or being with your family or meditation or extra sleep or whatever it is that you need, that makes you a better, more productive employee. Ultimately, that impacts the bottom line for these big businesses, right? They will have, less healthcare costs. They will have healthier, more productive, happier employees. So I think that while COVID has been terrible in so many ways, I think that there is going to be a lot of awakening that comes from it. And the last thing I'll say about it as well is that one thing I really like is if you take that Equinox situation, right? I managed a team of 55 trainers. I left 6 months later, COVID. I'll let you guess first, one guess, how many of the 55 trainers remain on that staff? Not because they've been let go or furloughed, but just take a guess first. Of the 55.
Half.
Six.
Oh,
6. Right? And I'll tell you why. It's not a bad thing. It's not because 49 trainers have been laid off or let go or don't have clients. It's because 49 trainers pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, developed an entrepreneurial spirit, were put in a situation where they had to adapt to survive, and created their own means for, training online or training their clients in person or renting space from a studio. And so what COVID has done for the fitness industry that I think is going to be so fucking good is that it's going to put the squeeze on these big box gyms like Equinoxes and Planet Fitnesses and Gold's gyms to take care of their good employees because they want them to stay. Because now trainers realize, I didn't need Equinox. I didn't need a global pandemic. I could have gone out and done this by myself, right?
yes.
And so I think that that's really good for the industry, because if these big box gyms have to set the standard for, hey, we have to pay all of our trainers a minimum $60,000 a year. We have to provide them with healthcare, and we have to provide them with 401k and this, that, and the other thing. That will just continue to raise the bar in our industry and trickle down. So I'll push all the bad things aside. COVID has been great, and I'll be honest, a lot of the trainers I know have told me that COVID has been great for them.
I
Financially,
totally agree.
you know,
I mean, you can go one of two ways with it, right? And like, yes, I don't think either of us are discounting what has happened in the world. But if we look at it in a vacuum of the training world,
yeah,
if you dealt with it the right way, you could actually springboard yourself into something much greater. And as you've talked about a few times, hopefully this is the start, or like really takes off in raising the standard of the industry and what is expected, and what you're going to have to do to compete as well as a coach and as a business. I love that.
Right. It's like, it's like they say when a team is rolling in the NHL and everybody's clicking, and then you got a couple guys in the American League that you're like, oh man, these guys are down there too. Like we're deep, right? Competition is good. When coaches and trainers are all doing really well, that's really good, right? Because it pushes everybody to step it up and up their game and be smarter, or deliver a better product, or be smarter about their business decisions, how they manage their systems. So yeah, it's all good. It's all
And
good.
it pushes the pretenders out.
Yes.
If you're not willing to put in the time and the work and to become the best coach you can, you're not going to last. You're not going to
Right.
last. I love that. And I think that's a great place to end off. I know that your Instagram is more for just sharing pictures of your kids, but where's the best place that people can find you? And maybe it is Instagram.
Honestly, it is. Like, I'm addicted to it, like we all are, right?
We all are. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it is pictures of my daughters and a little bit of fitness content from time to time, for sure. But if that doesn't interest you, if you're interested in just hearing, me ramble on about fitness in the fitness industry, on the Clubhouse app, right?
Yes.
It's not Mark Sanchez is my handle, and I'm on there at least once a day, in a room or two, breaking stuff down and chatting with people. Like, this is such a stupid thing to say, right? Not put it in air quotes, but like I've kind of developed a reputation as a quote unquote like authority on, like if somebody has a fitness question, like they'll ping me into a room, they think that I have a good answer, right?
That's great.
It's such a stupid way to give myself a virtual pat on the back, but it is the reality of the situation that, when I go in there, oftentimes like people are interested in what I have to say, and it's not because I'm amazing, but it's because I've been fortunate and blessed with a lot of experiences and opportunities, and I've been fortunate to be around people much smarter than I am, and learn from them, and hopefully I get to trickle that knowledge down, and those experiences down, and help other people develop too.
Oh yeah. And I forgot about that. Megan had told me about that, that's how we connected, for anyone listening, through Megan Pomeranski. And she said he's a bit of a big deal on Clubhouse. So that's really cool. I'm going to have to jump on there, and I still don't really know how it works. So I'm going to jump on and I'll just add you and then figure it out from there. But anyway,
what, I had no idea what it was or how it worked either. And the only reason I even heard about it was because my gym is called Clubhouse.
The Clubhouse, yes.
And I got the Instagram handle, The Clubhouse. No underscores, no letters, nothing. The app itself is called Clubhouse without the. However, until they actually did anything with their Instagram account, which they didn't for a very long time, no joke, hundreds a day of organic tags, comments, story shares, because people didn't even take the 2 seconds to look to see like the Clubhouse was my gym and not the app that they thought they were tagging and
Yes.
So it was really funny for a long time. People would be DMing me being like, oh, can I have an invitation to join the app and this and that? And I'm like, buddy, this isn't the app.
Talk about
Take one.
organic lead gen.
Yeah.
Hey?
I mean, right? It was
Hey.
fantastic. So
That's perfect, man. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing this.
my
I
pleasure.
can't thank you enough. It's been a great hour that's flown by. So thanks again, man. And hopefully we'll talk again very soon. Maybe
Yeah,
on
I'd love
Clubhouse.
to. We'll definitely do a 2.0 at some point. Anytime.
Beautiful. Okay. Thanks, man.